Today we're working on an A750F valve body. It was sent to us for a performance modification, which is a rebuild of the valve body in addition to some performance work. I was expecting the customer's original valve body, but what we had got was something that he had purchased on eBay as a rebuilt component. So we're going to show you what really needs to happen for this to be considered a rebuilt component.
All right, first we're going to get these solenoids out of here. Looks like somebody put a little sticker on them to tell us that they're good. So they must be. So let's get them out of here. So we've done some AB60 valve bodies, and these are pretty much the same. They're actually a little bit easier, but a lot of the parts even interchange between the two. And if you look at some of the other videos, we have these little brackets that retain the solenoids, right? And each one has a little pin that retains them. And if you notice, some of them have different ends on them. This one has an O-ring. This one just is a slide-in type. So again, we have bracket, and your two pins. All right, and then I kind of lay everything out as to where it goes. And you should too. Another sticker that tells us this is good. And this is the kind of the common numbers you're going to see on here. This is an 8850 is the most common one. And you're also going to see on the plate, it's upside down, but it's going to say T06. So now there's just a bunch of 10mm bolts. I like to take this cover off first. And then I keep all these bolts for this cover together. And there's one that you got to watch out for here, because if you put too long of a bolt through one of these holes, it's going to push too far through the other side, and when you put the filter on, it's going to blow a piece of the valve body out because it goes bolt to bolt and there's nowhere for anything to go except for the brake. Let's see which is the bolt we have to look out for here. Okay, you see this hole? This goes all the way through and contacts another bolt down here. Right, so it's this bolt. Now this bolt's slightly shorter. I don't know if you see this, but very, very important. You got to make sure this shorter bolt gets back in this hole. I would advise you to keep all these bolts how you took them out so you don't get confused. Then we're going to lift this up, and this one is going to be marked T05 for this separator plate. And we're going to look at our check ball locations. We zoom in on that. That's going to be a good guide for you when you put this back together. But again, there is different valve body check ball locations, so you got to see what's in your valve body as you took it apart to be certain. All right, so now we have a few more bolts. A few meaning like 10 or so. So these A750s, most of the ones we see are in Tacomas and FJ Cruisers. Usually starting from 2004. I'm not sure what year they stopped using them. All right, so this is another section. You could take note of those check ball locations. So this is all going to come apart, but I'm not going to bore you by putting it all on camera. But for now, I want to check and make sure that they all move freely, you know, before I mess with it and start taking stuff apart. Because this person did have problems, so what we want to do is try and find out what caused them and how the unit got in this condition. So these are all free. With the other side here, and what we're going to have is a filter, and we're going to have a relief valve and a spring. All right, and that goes right here. And I'm going to take a couple of these valves out just to show you, but for the most part, we're going to strip this all down, clean it up, and then put it back together. So this is your pressure regulator. This is often a source of wear. I'll try and do this so you guys can see it. So this got a special retainer, right? There's only one like it in this transmission, and that's for the pressure regulator. And this boost valve sleeve looks a little stuck, so might take some effort to get it out. It's really jammed in here because it's so dirty. And this is the part we're changing, so it's pretty much 100% failure rate on this boost valve. There it comes. So inside of it, we have two valves. This is one of them. And this is the other. And as you can see, they start to wear right in this area. So inside of here, we have a valve with the two valves that sit in here. The spring. Your pressure regulator valve, and it's got a little spring seat on it. All right, along with the special retainer. So this is all what your pressure regulator lineup looks like. And we're not going to be able to get in here and see it really, but it wears out down in these lands. And that could give you soft shifts, it could give you hard shifts, it could give you a delay in reverse, just all depending on where the valve wears out. But it's very common source of issues in these things. All right, next we're going to look at this accumulator control valve and its sleeve. As you can see, there's different levels in here. That's kind of an adjustment. So we make some changes in here, but this is how it normally looks. And I don't know if I'm going to get this thing out without a fight. Okay, so there's a pin that retains it. A little sleeve in the middle. Then what I like to do is try and get in here. Sometimes you could pull it out. So what you're going to have in here is your accumulator control valve and its spring. And I believe this valve body might not be out of a vehicle. I think maybe the guy bought it on eBay or something like that, you know, because of the stickers. So now we're going to take this thing and clean everything up. All right, this is some of what we ran into, and this is kind of common. This is one of the TCC valves. This wears out, so you probably can't see it, but this is slightly oversized, so we're going to have to ream the valve body out and put the oversized valve in here. And when I'm doing this, I'm going to show you guys how loose this is. This is a TCC control valve sleeve. This kind of wears out, so it gets replaced with this steel sleeve, and the sleeve is, you know, made of steel, so it's much less likely to wear than the aluminum sleeve. Now we have a solenoid regulator that wears out, so we're going to change that. And we have this B1 accumulator. I don't know if you can see how scored this is. And you have another one of these in the case too that's kind of the same thing. And Sonex makes an aftermarket piece, so it's got annular grooves to make sure it stays lubricated, and it's got an O-ring to improve the sealing. So this is a pretty big improvement. Then after that, we have an oversized pressure regulator valve to replace your pressure regulator valve, and a boost sleeve. Right, so this is a billet boost sleeve that's going to replace the worn one. I don't know if we're going to be able to see this, but this thing is really worn to death. So I'm going to bore this out, and it's going to be good as new in a second. All right, we're going to start with the relay, lockup relay valve. We put some oil on the reamer. And are the two valves that we have to bore out. This is going to be the easier of the two. So this thing guides the reamer for us. And that's done. So obviously we got to clean all this metal out of here. And now we got to bore the pressure regulator valve, which is a little bit more involved. I'll show you the setup in a second. All right, Sonex makes this holding fixture, and this is necessary to bore this valve body. So this is a spherical joint. We tighten this all up, and there's a guide pin to align the valve body. And when it's working right, it should slide in and out very easily, like this. The next step is we're going to oil up our reamer. I already oiled up the valve body. And now we're going to cut this oversize for our oversized pressure regulator valve to be installed. And I just use a 12-point socket and a little ball joint on here. Some guys use drills and other things. I prefer to do it by hand. One step, two steps, three steps. We could kind of see up here our reamer in the bore. And it's doing its last cutting now. And now it's not making noise and it's turning freely. Can you get in here and we'll show this? That's your reamer doing its thing in the bore there. You always want to turn it as you take it out. So obviously we have to clean this thing up again. All right, now we're going to check the fit of our new pressure regulator valve. And it feels pretty nice in there. Next, we have our little spring seat. So I like to put this on a pick and drop it in there. Next, the springs. And next is the boost valve. And as you see, there's 3 positions in which you can put it. We're going to put this in the middle position. And this valve has to go in, this retainer has to go in a specific way as well. All right, next we're going to work on the accumulator control valve. We're just going to put some grease to hold this all in here so it doesn't move on us. And we're going to check to make sure it moves freely. You have the little finagling to get that valve in there correctly. Now we're going to put this sleeve in. Oh, that fell on us. Trying to do it so you could see it, but I'm going to have to turn this thing on the side or it's going to keep falling out on me. And this little guy's got to go in here too. And when you put these together, you want to put it back to the same spot that the original one was in. You usually have to lift this inner piece up a little bit. Whoops. I don't know if you guys could see what I'm doing there. This has a hole in it. So this pin has to engage the hole in here, then the hole down on the other side here. And then you can always adjust this thing to where you need it to be adjusted, as you see. There's about 6 or 7 different steps that you could put it in. All right, this is our new TCC relay valve that we just bored out. So you can see it's free. Now we're going to get a little grease. Grease our spring into this pocket. This valve goes in next. And this is nice and free. It was a little tight going in, but what happens is these retainers feed a little raised area into the valve body after a while. So it's all right once you get past it, because that's nowhere where the valve's ever going to have to ride. And sometimes these take a couple taps to get them in there. And we have one of these square retainers, and then I kind of push it back against the retainer so it doesn't fall out. Now this is similar. So TCC control, I'm going to do the same thing. Hold that in there with some grease. Valve in here. This valve goes in first. That bottomed out nicely and it's nice and free. And this sleeve comes with its own special retainer. The factory retainer doesn't work anymore when you change this. So this is our new solenoid regulator valve setup. And we drop in a little square retainer. All right, this retainer likes to fall out, so we put a little grease here, and I put it in with some grease. So if you're working on one of these, this is the valve you have to be looking at. So these I like to roll on the bench a little bit to make sure that this O-ring is seated in there. I'm going to use my special transmission assembly lube. Lube up the bore and lube this up. If you're using a factory valve, it doesn't really need lube, but we got to do this because it's got an O-ring on it. Okay, that went in pretty nicely. All right, so I have all the check balls in, both sides. We have our screen, our little TCC relief. Just oil it up a little bit. Here. This plate we have to lay down, and we have to make sure that screen gets engaged properly. I'm going to pick this whole guy up. Put it down here. Okay. We have one really short bolt. And then we have four longer ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the rest of these are the same. And as you see, this one is a little bit smaller than the rest of the bolt holes. So right here and right here have smaller holes. So you're going to want to tighten these two bolts first, because that's going to make sure everything's aligned properly. I'm going to put our cover on. And we have two different length bolts here. Longer ones and shorter ones. All right, there's a couple things you have to be really careful of. This bolt here has to be a short one, because that's the one that might blow up your valve body if you put it in wrong. And then we have two alignment bolts, here and here. So they're a little bit smaller, and they have to get put in first. Now everything that's left is going to be the same size bolt. So for starters, that bolt, that bolt, that bolt, and that bolt, those all have to get done first. And now they get torqued to 90 inch-pounds. Now, this is something you want to check for, is your filter bolt.
All right, you want to make sure that you got a short bolt there and that this thing is going to be shorter than your filter bolt. Otherwise, this piece blows right off the valve body and you'll have a whole world of problems. Right now, we're going to put our manual valve and all our solenoids in. And this manual valve, you're going to want to put in before the solenoids. So that guy's a 10mm bolt, and the rest of them are going to be 8s. And you're going to see there's a little slot here, and this is going to have to engage into that slot. And the same with this one. This little hole down. $8mm bolt. Then our last solenoid goes here. And there's 2 8mm bolts to hold it down. Just make sure these are free too when you tighten these brackets up. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.